All right, welcome back to Science in My Kitchen. We're continuing to talk about the atmosphere. Today, specifically, we're going to be talking about how the energy from the sun affects our atmosphere. First question, what is energy? All right, so I think we've talked about this before. There's not a great definition for the word energy. The official science definition is the ability to do work. Horrible definition, but it's the one we're stuck with, so we're going to go with it. Now, there are lots of different types of energy. The sun produces several, but one in particular that benefits us, and that is heat energy. If you go outside today, the reason that it's not crazy cold out is because the sun's energy is warming the earth. Now, all of the heat, well, nearly all of the heat that the earth has comes from the sun. You could argue that we get a little bit geothermally from the core of the earth, but most of that heat doesn't reach the surface unless you're in Iceland or something like that. The sun's energy is responsible for the wind, ocean currents. It's what makes plants grow. So basically all of the energy that we end up with on Earth in all of its forms comes from the sun. Now, a lot of the energy or heat energy that comes from the sun doesn't actually make it to the Earth. About 6% of it is reflected by the atmosphere. Itself. 25% gets reflected by clouds, and then another 4% actually gets reflected by the surface of the earth. So if any of you ever go out into space, you will notice that the earth is pretty bright. It's because it reflects a large percentage of, well, not large, but a percentage of the light that comes to it. It's actually considerably higher than the moon. If you're somewhere out in space where you see both the earth and the moon, you would notice that the earth is a lot brighter than the moon. Hopefully one day some of you will actually get to experience that. I fear that the chances for me to travel in space are getting dimmer, but some of you may be able to. Now, the rest of the stuff, the rest of the heat energy gets absorbed. 15% of what's left gets absorbed by the atmosphere, and the last 50% gets absorbed by the earth itself. So a full half of the heat energy that comes from the sun actually gets absorbed by the earth. Now, we need to talk about how heat gets from one place to another. And there are three methods that heat can be transferred from one thing to another. And those methods are conduction, convection, and radiation. You're familiar with all of them. You may not know the names, but you are familiar with all of them. But the least familiar one is the one that we're going to be talking about the most in this section, because the sun transfers its heat to us by radiation. So the first one, conduction. Conduction is the transfer of heat by direct contact. You pick up something that's hot, it transfers its heat into you, and you drop it and yell and do whatever else you do when you get hurt. So conduction is the transfer of heat by direct contact. We are obviously not in direct contact with the sun, so we do not receive any heat from the sun by conduction. All right, convection is the transfer of heat by a flow of material. If you've ever used a hairdryer, the hairdryer heats up air and then blows the hot air to you, and that's how it transfers the heat. It moves the air by a flow of material, a flow of hot moving air. That's convection. We talked about convection currents when we were talking about magma. That's transferring heat by the movement of magma. But we don't get heat from the sun by convection either, because there's no material between us and the sun. It has to travel through a vacuum. And this is the last one. Radiation is the transfer of heat by rays or waves. And radiation is why you can feel heat coming off of things even if there's no material moving. So if something, if you have an electric stove and you turn the burner on, and you hold your hand over it, you can feel the heat coming off of it. Part of that's convection because it is heating up the air above it, but part of it is just radiational heating. It's sending heat waves to you from the heating element. So these are the three methods of heat transfer. And that is it for today, class-wise. Tomorrow I'll be sending out another short one with an assignment attached to it. I do want to remind you that I will be having office hours on Zoom every weekday from 10 to 11. You can get on Zoom and join my meeting and ask me questions face to face if you have any questions, or if you just want to say hello. And this is the meeting ID that you need to sign in. Look forward to seeing you again whenever that happens. I do miss you, and have a good day.